Good evening, everybody. With the posted time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Finance Committee meeting for Thursday, October 3rd, 2019 to order. Tonight begins the first in a series of Finance Committee meetings whereby we will present and work in a workshop-type setting in our committee to formulate the 2020 municipal budget. The next meeting session for this process will be on October 10th, next Thursday at 6:30. And typically, the Finance Committee, during this process, will meet about 5 times in October, 2 of its regular meetings and at least 3 for this purpose. So tonight, our sole focus is discussion and possible action regarding the 2020 budget and the 2020 fee schedule. And so I'll turn it over to Mary Ann. She's going to walk us through the first part of that, where we're going to try to focus on our capital projects.
So we'll look at capital projects, and of course, the debt service fund is impacted by our capital projects. And then at the next meeting, we will talk about the operating budget. We should have the budget posted on the website no later than Monday morning. And we'll have copies for you in your boxes. So if you're coming to City Hall on Monday, you can pick it up. Otherwise, we'll have them for council and finance, and we'll distribute them to all of council then on that evening. So our capital projects fund for the 2020 is proposed at $3,529,242, and that budget really is consists of our infrastructure budget that is established by the engineering department, and SISM kind of reviews the projects that are slated for the upcoming year, and the work that was done by the CIP committee this year, which was endorsed by the committee of the whole, a meeting a week or so ago. So we've got about $1.9 million in the budget for infrastructure, $175,000 for Park and Rec, $173,000 for rolling stock, equipment of $547,000, and facilities of about $795,000. When we look at how we pay for that, you can see we rely heavily on our general debt proceeds for the capital budget. Our levy is about $575,000. That's what's proposed in the 2020 budget. That is up from $498,000, almost $499,000 in the 2019 levy. So about a $76,000 increase in the levy for the 2020 budget. And then the other portion of revenue that's set aside for capital projects is about $376,000, which is some grants and then our special assessment revenue. So when I started working with the city,
Excuse me, where is this in the packet?
it's not, it's summarizing what, so if you are on page 3, it's summarizing page 3. I'm just trying to.
I have another question. Any reason we couldn't have had this in advance of tonight so we could have looked at it? We got 55 pages of data here.
Sure. We'll introduce it tonight, and then maybe that is the purpose of that third meeting, is for us to circle back on the things that are introduced during the first 2 meetings.
But we're discussing it tonight, right?
But we're not taking final action. This is
Yeah.
just the first
It
workshop.
doesn't make a difference if we're taking final action out. We're discussing it, so we have to understand it tonight, right?
Right, this is the presentation.
Yeah.
She starts with a presentation, and then we get a book on Tuesday, the full
Okay,
budget book on
but-
Tuesday.
Okay, that doesn't answer my question. My question is, could we have not had, I mean, when was this produced? Like this afternoon or something, or when was it?
Well, we've been working on it. You know, I maybe had it done, and I haven't updated it for the mall changes that were just proposed, because of course that affected the budgets. So that is the final thing that I have to do, actually. So I'm going to probably tomorrow work on getting the changes that were proposed because of the mall approval, and then we'll be able to publish the budget on Monday. So I don't know. It's hard to tell. I can't tell you when this was done. I've been working every night, Dennis, all weekend, every weekend in the month of
And
September,
I
so.
understand that. You've got a tough road to hoe, there's no doubt
Yeah.
about it. And I appreciate that. But, we have a tough road to hoe, too.
I
We're supposed to look at this
totally
stuff
understand that.
and so on. We're supposed to work together, and I'm not trying to beat you up. I can't imagine what you have to, the hoops you have to jump through to even put this stuff together for us, much less, get it to us. But it would help us that are, I'm a marketing
Certainly,
guy, so I'm not a
I
numbers guy.
recognize
I'm a
that.
left
Right.
brain, guy. So I just want to know that, it would be nice to have looked at this and, not that we would understand it because it is fairly complex, but nice to have looked at it a little bit earlier. But,
Sure.
you've explained it. I understand, the challenges you have also.
I think, and I can concur, but I think this is really an interesting way to look at it as well as have it explained to it while we're looking at it as a first glance. And so I can appreciate what you're saying, Dennis, as well as appreciate the position that we're in here. So I am very helped by looking and hearing at the same time so that it can answer questions that I may have.
It may help if
Yet
we
to dream
follow,
up.
we can follow along
Right.
with her, and then, yep, we'll certainly have questions.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
So what I was starting to say is, when I first started working for the city, we had a lot more money that we allocated of the property tax levy each year to the capital budget. But over the years, as our revenues became tighter and tighter, operations took away from the levy, from the capital, and then during Act 10, and the state took away so much of our shared revenues, that's when we really took a hit in the levy. So, today, we're at $575,000 of cash that we are actually applying of the taxpayers' dollars, and then the rest of it we're paying over time. And again, our debt proceeds for the capital budget are usually a 10-year promissory note. So the significant capital projects that we have in the 2020 budget, as I said, 1.9 million of that is infrastructure projects. The DOT project is engineering for 6th Street. The street project is Kickbush. Every year, we try to do a little bit of asphalt overlay on the streets. That is budgeted at $275,000. This, again, is an area that both asphalt overlay and sidewalk, both of those budgets have declined over the years as we have gotten tighter and tighter capital budget. The storm sewer, the most of that is related to the storm sewer underneath Kickbush. And then other capital improvements are things like our concrete repair that we do, which of course we've all experienced
Joint repair?
recently driving around town.
Yep.
So that basically is our infrastructure budget in just what we'll call the general capital projects area. From facilities, if you recall, the fire station is getting a two-phased approach, so this would be for central fire, and the majority of this is improving the living area in the fire station. If you recall, when we borrowed for the West Side Fire construction project, we said that we did not borrow for the contingency, and we did not borrow for the furniture and fixtures. And we said we were going to do that in 2020. Again, when we issue promissory notes, we can basically, if a project comes in under budget, we can move those proceeds from one project to another. But on a bond, you're not allowed to do that. And so if we had borrowed for the full amount of contingency, we wouldn't have had a purpose for those funds then, because we would have only been able to use them for fire station construction. And we thought for furniture and fixtures, we didn't really want to borrow for 20 years. So we said, okay, we're going to pull out the furniture and fixtures out of that budget, and we're going to pull out the contingency. And by the time we come to 2020, we'll know whether we need that contingency. So we might not even borrow for this full 420. I think about 200 of it was for the furnitures and fixtures in the new facility, and the rest of it was contingency. So we've got this earmarked in the 2020 budget. It would be, again, a 10-year promissory note, but we might not borrow it if that contingency is not drawn upon, or we would just only draw to the amount of the contingency.
Sure.
And then, if you also recall, Matt Barnes came in and gave a presentation to you because he was over budget on that evidence storage facility. And so his recommendation was to pull out the paving project out of that and to fund that in the 2020 budget. So that is showing up in our plan for 2020. And then the rest of this is things that, again, the CIP committee and the COW endorsed, which is facility maintenance in the transit, the carport for DPW, and the chiller at City Hall.
Okay.
As far as equipment and technology, it would be the municipal court software, the extrication equipment for the fire department, the GIS, ortho imagery, so again, maintaining all of our GIS information and the pictures that they take, the Dragon natural speaking software for police to help them become more efficient on records and reports, the EMS monitors, and while we've budgeted $160,000, we're expecting about $140,000 in grant revenue from that. Special assessment software of $90,000 and floor scrubber sweeper for transit of $49,000. So we got about $547,000 of equipment.
Excuse me, what is GIS? You want to back that up one second?
Sure. So
What
the.
is GIS ortho? Ortho would use the stuff I spread on my lawn, I think, for imagery and LiDAR. I'm unfamiliar with those terms.
This is the aerial photography project where they take over aerial photos and use them for mapping. And it's a 3-year project, I think, right, Eric? Was it 3 years of? I think we're in year 2. Are we year 2 or year 3?
Year 2.
Okay.
And GIS is Geographical Information System, so all the maps and stuff that the city uses for all the departments. What's
Oh,
that?
I was trying to tell Jamie there's handouts out
Oh,
there, sorry.
I'll get her one.
Okay.
So, you know, all the mapping and stuff that we do, that's all GIS.
Okay, all right,
yeah.
I was just unsure exactly what that meant, thank
The
you.
ortho is the ortho photography, so.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't even see Ann was here too. Sorry, I didn't see that you were here, Ann. He had one.
He's got
I
one.
gave him one before.
He was here first.
Oh, now I'm going the wrong way. So, the balance of the projects are, the park rolling stock of $173,460 and the play equipment of $95,000. And I guess I didn't update this spreadsheet, because we took 20 of that and moved it to the dog park.
Dog park, yes. So after the
So-
committee of the whole, we had reduced that play equipment to 75 and bumped up the dog park
Yep.
for 20. And then we committed to watching for either savings in other budget areas or surplus that we could replace the 20,000 for the play equipment
Right.
after the fact. So we're hoping that that's not gone forever, but on the first pass, the COW recommended that we not fund in full.
So as far as the projects that were requested but remained unfunded, this is just a list of those in ranked order. So if we had had more money, the next item on the ranking was to upgrade the Metro Rides IT. We had our financial software system at $560,000, the point-of-sale cashiering system at $170,000, 2 projects at the airport totaling $300,000, land acquisition for Public Works for expansion of their facility area of $275,000, safety building improvements of $60,000, tennis court replacement of $50,000, the shooting range of 300,000, the airport crane of 30, Sylvan Hill parking lot of 125, and Memorial Park seawall of 135. So those are unfunded today.
Okay?
In the infrastructure area, as I pointed out, the asphalt overlay project, we used to fund about 500,000 and usually about 200 to 300,000 for sidewalk. But in addition to cutting those budgets back, a number of streets, we had insufficient funds to get those done in the 2020 budget. And those all were on the southeast side. We tried to group these projects from a geographic area so that, there is less startup, what do they call that?
I think less disruption, so that
Yeah.
they're not under construction
And
every year for something
yeah,
else.
mobilization costs
Right.
for the contractor. So these were projects that were slated for 2020, but will not be done because of limited funds. And really, when we look at the capital budget, we're looking at how much do we think we can increase the levy by, and what do we usually borrow for so that we're not having to increase our levy in future years to retire that debt. So that's what I refer to as limitation. And that, I think that this could be an agenda item for in the future, because we have been able to supplement our street projects through our tax increment districts. But as those tax increment districts mature and get ready to terminate, that funding source then goes away. And so, I think Eric and I would like to come before the Finance Committee and kind of show you what the future is going to be like once the districts are closed and our street projects are limited to our capital budget. And in your handout, not on here, but you can see the list of future projects starts on page 7 of your handout and ends at page 9. But you can see by bumping this then to 2021, we ultimately will have to delay the 2021 projects likely to 2022. And, they are significant in nature. And so that deferral just continues to grow then. So the Central Equipment Fund was started in 2016 and was supposed to try to relieve some of the pressure that was going on during the capital budget, because we saw things happening like the fire department coming on a regular basis because they needed to replace their turnout gear, they have to replace their hoses periodically, radios need to be replaced, IT just for PC replacement. They were coming in and they were competing with projects that are what we would say just occasional projects. And so the idea of creating this central equipment fund so that departments could rely that there would be funding for those regular replacements and not have to compete took place. And we've been trying to, again, grow this so that some of these regular replacements can move out of the CIP. Again, we're confined by the amount of levy that we can raise. But we did, again, make some headway in this proposed budget. So last year, the budget was $426,000. This year, it would be $490,000. And the fire department and the police department were the main benefactors for that increase.
I'm glad to see that we at least have a start on that. I think that, that's important as we build it over time. And a lot of the discussion that we had in past years was, there are items that, whether they're critical pieces of safety equipment, whether they're breathing apparatus, whether they're, fire hoses like Mary Ann said, or whether they're simple things like PC replacements where stuff has a limited life. We were for years and years continuously ranking PC replacements and things like that where we needed to have a fund where we know what the lifespan of those items is and that there's a pool of funds there to get them when it's needed. And then we're not taking and having our critical safety gear competing in the ranking process with sidewalk repair and telephone systems, because you all know how that's going to end at the end of the day. So at least to gradually build this up certainly makes sense, because all of the departments have cyclical needs and things that, live out their life, like this extrication equipment and things like that, even those EMS monitors. At some point, if stuff like that could be a part of a fund like this, there'd be a lot less push and pull and back and forth when the needs develop, because we know they're coming anyway.
Right. So like the Parks Department, these are all of their small projects that they're doing in the parks, like a roof for a bathroom at a facility.
water fountains and all that little
Or a
stuff,
shelter's roof,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Small projects that need to be done.
That's good, because then that keeps the departments also from having to add 3 or 4 small projects together to qualify for CIP, which was really never what it was supposed to be for anyway. So if we can take care of the small stuff while it's still small stuff, that certainly makes sense.
So all of our tax increment districts are classified as capital projects funds too. So, and really my slides, I'm trying to isolate the things that I think are of the most importance. But again, we can go through more in-depth, at that meeting 3, or if you have questions and we want to circle back to them. So TID 3 is in the downtown. It was created in 1994. Its mandated closure date is 2031. We saw a 2.4% decrease in the equalized value this year. There's been a lot of property changing hands over at the YMCA area that's been moving property out of taxable to tax exempt. So that is likely the cause of that. The projected deficit at the end of 2019, so if you were looking at your handouts on page 19, I'm trying to isolate what is showing up, because that cash flow projection really is me trying to predict the finances of the district in the future. So, the levy, the increment that we generate from the district is pretty predictable. The other income oftentimes is predictable because, we're getting a pilot payment from the state when they eliminated computer aid. We're getting a pilot from the state when they eliminated a category of personal property. So that's what that other income is. For districts, oftentimes there's grant income like from the WEDC in this situation, or we have a DNR grant for the riverfront and this county, the old ACT money, now they call it the environmental fund. So those are the types of grants that would show up. And of course, our debt is a known number, and if we're going to borrow, we always add that anticipated borrowing to that amortization. So our projected deficit in this district is $1,080,000 at the end of 2019. In 2020, that is predicted to go up to $1.6 million. And the outstanding debt at the end of 2019 is $21 million. Our projects for 2020 are $3,192,000, and those are itemized in your handout on page 16. And those relate to 3rd Street improvements. The proposal is to carry forward some of the design standards that we have on 3rd Street in the downtown forward to the YMCA, in front of the YMCA and the new Aspirus
clinic.
area. The Fulton Street improvements, if you recall, we had been carrying that money forward. So this is rebudgeting, because every year we have to reestablish that budget for a project. So it's reestablishing the Fulton Street budget. Parking improvements of $190,000. We would like to install LED lighting in the Jefferson ramp. We likely will not need of city money that full amount. We met with Focus on Energy last week, and there would be grant funding similar to the grant funding that we got for the Pennies and Sears ramp. But these LED lights have a 2-year payback, so it is really worth the city's investment to try to save on those utilities because the parking fund is, under duress on trying to manage the annual operating expenses. So that would allow us to make those improvements. The Bridge Street Bridge rehab, we don't have an exact figure on this. The worst-case scenario is about $900,000, and this is to do all of the expansion joints and to do an asphalt overlay, I believe, on that,
On the bridge deck?
on the bridge deck. And we would be looking to submit to the county because the bridge aid is a 50/50 match. And so we would be looking for the county to contribute $450,000 in bridge aid money for that project. Barker Stewart Island improvements of $70,000. There is a desire to do some major cleaning up of that area, so that would fund that. First Street improvements would be just to, I guess, make some street improvements in front of the Dudley area now that there is going to be the change of the highway there. They'd like to make some improvements to make that a little bit more pedestrian friendly. And then the First Street corridor trails are trails going between First Street and the river, kind of in between the Dudley Tower and the parking lots, and it would be north of the eye clinic. And like I said, we have some DNR funding for the project and some or the environmental fund. And both of those grants we need to get going on because we're running out of time for those.
I have a question.
Yep.
The deficit for 19 and 20, those will be covered by the general fund, correct?
Yes, yep.
All right, thank you.
Yep. And the cash flow kind of for the district on page 19 gives you a historical review of what the deficits have been in the district and then projects forward. So if we project forward on those, you can see that the deficits are going to remain kind of constant through that period, 2019 to 2023. And this is going to be slightly different than what's in your handout because this slide has the mall in it. Because if you recall, we were relying on this district to do about $300,000 of annual funding. And so I don't have my budget book updated for that yet, but I quick updated the.
But this one would also not, or does this already include the estimated value of the new clinic? Or does it not include
It
the
does
clinic
not
yet?
include the new clinic.
Okay.
Because right.
Okay.
So you can see by 2028, we are out of that deficit position. And actually, since the district extends on till 2031, by that point, we've got about $9 million of surplus in the district at its retirement, which of course, you can't have a surplus, ongoing surplus. But it does show that the district, for the obligations that it has today and the obligations that we are proposing for 2020, will be funded by the district over its life.
Sure.
But you're showing from 219 through 224 deficits of about $9 million, if not more.
Well, this is accumulated, so it's not, you wouldn't add those up and say, like.
Okay, so it's 1,080,000 on 219, and then it jumps up to 1,807, which is the difference between 80 and
Yep.
807.
Yep.
Then it joins up again.
Yes.
But still, that's all going to be funded by the general fund, is that correct?
Correct.
So we really don't start producing any money. I mean, it starts to go down in 2024. It drops from 356 down to 499. But we
Correct.
really don't start making any money till 2025.
Right.
Okay.
And again, this now has the new obligation that we agreed to with the mall in it. So that if you recall, the 327,000, which was really supposed to shore up their annual operations, is the maximum amount that was basically agreed to. But the term sheet had language in there that if their reserves that they had on hand exceeded 350,000, that our contribution each year would get reduced.
Reduced.
So that they weren't accumulating reserves.
Right, and so then these numbers also would skew to the positive, or more positive anyway, once we have a finished River Life apartment complex,
Yes, absolutely.
future River Life development, and the completion of that clinic.
Yes.
So once all,
Well,
we
the
start to see.
clinic is going to be in TID 12.
Oh, the
So-
clinic is in 12, okay.
Yes. But some of
But-
the surrounding properties that they used were in TID 3
Okay.
when they
But
purchased
these
it.
deficits, were these deficits figured before when we were still going to receive some tax money from the mall? Now we're not going to receive any tax money from the mall, is that correct?
So the mall isn't in this district, it's in
Okay.
TID 12.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
yep. And really, it's just pennies that's in TID 12. The mall itself isn't in a district.
So the mall's taxes go to the general fund already?
Yes.
Since TID 2 closed?
Since TID 1.
TID 1 closed,
Yes.
yep,
Yep.
okay.
So TID 5 is our business campus district, and its life ends, it has a mandated closure of 2020. So we will likely be bringing a resolution in probably December or January to close the district after we adopt our 2020 budget. So we'll generate an increment in 2020 for the district, and then in 2021, all of that increment will go back to all of the taxing entities to use for operating. So our levy in 2021 will, I have 2020, my PowerPoint's wrong. So the new levy in 2021 to the general fund will be about 300,000 once we close that district, because we get about a third of the levy.
Right.
And that increment is about $950,000 right now.
Now, under the law, though, with TID closure, when we get to that closure date, we do have the legal right to capture that increment for an extra year or two to mitigate blight, right?
We can do it for 1 year.
1 year,
Yeah,
okay.
so that's what we'll be bringing to the council. Do you want to extend the life of the district an extra year and forego this benefit to the general fund? Because you would get the whole increment. You can't take part of it, so.
So it's
you would-
all or nothing.
Right. So you would, take 900-some thousand dollars and use it for blight elimination, which really is housing stock improvement. You can't use it for any kind of blight elimination. It can be only for housing stock improvement, and 70% of it has to go to low-income housing, and 30% of it could be used for any kind of housing.
Now, we did that with
Stop.
TID 2. When TID 2 closed, we recaptured it, and we used some of that, for
Right.
Short Street to the north, all this new stuff that you see along Third Street. Some of that area has benefited from the reclamation of that extra increment from when TID 2 closed. We decided to wait that year and capture that money and use it and give that area a shot in the arm, because that was our next big thing. There is a similar interest in doing more of that, either in the athletic park neighborhood, where they're identifying a special inspection district, or east of Sixth Street in the Easttown neighborhood, which also needs some attention. And so, we've got TID 5 coming, and the following year, we've got TID 7 coming, and we would have that option in those years if we would choose to take it. So I would say just keep that in the back of your mind, that you have the option, if you're willing to wait 1 more year, you could use all of that money for those big things. So we did it, it was successful the first time.
Madam Chair, if you could
Go ahead.
give us, one of the representatives of, would it be community development that would present?
Yes.
Possible opportunities
Yep.
as they see the area, or,
We could ask Tammy and Chris for some insight on that when the time comes.
and how it would be,
Right. And that's why
Quickly
we thought if
utilized.
we introduced it, in December, January, you have to decide this, I think it's by, I can tell you exactly. So July 8th, you have to have your resolution adopted by July 8th. But we thought, starting in January, or December or January, you'll have done your budget work, and you can decide then whether you want to terminate or whether you want to keep it open. Again, it's, do you want tax relief sooner, or do you want to hold off on that tax relief?
And with 2 districts maturing pretty soon here, actually 3 of them maturing pretty soon here, you certainly wouldn't need to do it on all of them.
Right.
But we should look at the dollars involved and see if it makes sense to do it on at least one, and maybe capitalize some of those funds that have been yielding some positive results for us in terms of neighborhood rehab. So that's worth thinking about when the time comes.
So, like I said, that it will bring about $300,000 to the general fund when we close the district. So TID 6, this is the district that kind of runs along the interstate. It helped with the UK. It paid $4 million about on the UK project. It followed down the interstate. It helped with 17th Avenue and the redevelopment of 17th Avenue. It then followed 17th Avenue down to Thomas Street, and it has funded Thomas Street for us, and now it is funding part of First Avenue, as well as it has funded other street projects. So we got authority from the Joint Review Board to do street projects outside of the district within the half-mile boundary. So it has been working really hard for the city on infrastructure projects.
It is one of the best TIDs we have.
Yes, so that district, its projected deficit at the end of 2019 is about $52,000. Again, that would be if all of the capital projects are drawn and paid in full at the end of the year. The 2020 projected deficit is about $280,000. Its outstanding debt at the end of 2019 is about $13 million. And we have about $2.9 million worth of projects. This district's expenditure period closes in 2020. So June of 2020, we have to be done with all of our projects. And we're projecting issuing debt of $2.2 million in the 2020 budget. The projects in this district are, let's see, what are the projects in this district?
Riverside Park Trail.
Yep, the Riverside, page
28, yep.
28, yep. So we have the Riverside Park Trail / road and seawall of 1.2 million. We have the West Side streetscape of 225,000, street tree planting of 130,000. The reconstruction of the 18th Avenue project with Shopko facility, that redevelopment. Other street improvements of about 190,000. And then Cedar Street, 7th to 14th Avenue. So this would be a street improvement project that's in that half-mile boundary. So that is the projects that are slated for the 2020 budget. So this district, again, 2020 is its last year of expenditure, so we've been borrowing really short-term on these because the district is going to close in 2025. So when we issued debt for Thomas Street and First Avenue, it was a 6-year issue,
Okay.
and every year we're shortening those issues to meet that termination date. So you can see that we'd have some small deficits. And really, we could do, if we didn't want to do that, and this is another area of planning that we could spend, either, maybe we should have a couple of special meetings or just say we're not going to take business on, let's say, the first meeting of the month or something, where we could look at, because, typically, we have tried to retire the debt in a fashion where we're not pushing principal off to later years in the district. We just retire the debt with an even debt payment through the life of the district. But if you wanted to eliminate deficits, you could say, oh, we're going to match the revenue stream and we're going to push off the principal payment to a later period, but you're going to incur more interest costs then. So, the
Well,
general.
it's like paying interest only and then accumulating what
Right.
is almost like a balloon at the end.
Right. So you
Yeah.
have these deficits.
That might be
Again,
worse.
the general fund has been managing those because because we look at our projects and make sure that those deficits aren't accumulating, but that, we could look at a what-if in those kinds of
It would be important, I
things.
think, to see that illustration, because then we can figure out which is worse.
Right.
And which is better. So it would be good to have that knowledge, I think.
Yep. So again, by the end of 2025, it would have a surplus of about $664,000 based on the increment that we currently collect in the district. District 7, this district paid for all of the improvements out on the Stewart Avenue. And again, we created the district, and then, basically the economy fell, and we were unable to pay for the improvements because there was no new development. This is also where we had our big developer obligations with Chuck Godorsky, with Godorsky Companies for the improvements, because if you recall, there was a lot of DOT property. They left it in basically horrible conditions after they did the interstate and all of the
So
bypass
the corner of
activity.
28th and Stewart is in this one?
Yes.
Right? Yes, okay.
So this district has basically retired almost all of its debt. At the end of this year, 2019, it only has $168,000 worth of debt left. So again, to my old example, we had predicted just a stable annual debt payment through the life of the district, and then those accumulated deficits were managed by the general fund. And now we're going to see those deficits drop quickly because the debt is basically going to be retired. The deficit at the end of 2019 is 1.4 million. The projected deficit at the end of 2020 is 1.1 million. Again, we would be looking at some streetscape projects out there and a developer payment to Godorsky on that existing developer's agreement of $285,000. So to show you just how quickly the deficit is going to decline in this district, by 2021, the deficit will be $397,000, and then it will be eliminated, and we will be in a positive in 2022. So to Lisa's point, in 2022, you would, potentially be able to eliminate and terminate the district, or you would be able to extend the district that 1 year for increment to use for housing stock improvements. And then the mandated closure date is 2025.
Well, and on projects like that, with housing stock improvements, $585,000 goes a long way. And what they do with those loan funds that they manage in community development is they capitalize a loan fund, they loan it out, when people pay it back, they loan it out again. And they keep recycling those funds, so you keep seeing that impact over and over in perpetuity, which is why it made sense to do with TID 2, because now they've got this fund that they can recycle as people repay, and this would be something similar.
Right.
So,
And I think the other thing is that they are, typically, community development has put their loan program for housing rehab together with federal or state dollars, and then there's a lot of strings tied to that and a lot of extra requirements that this money doesn't have. I mean, it definitely has to benefit, so the one stipulation for that 70% is that the homeowners can only pay 30% of their income for housing. So that really is, and they do manage that, they check with the homeowners during the application process to make sure that it meets that.
well, and you recall a few years ago, we had talked about a program where, with one of these revolving type loan funds, one of the caveats, like Mary Ann was saying, when you fund them with federal dollars, when somebody endeavors to do a project, they're basically required to bring the entire place up to code all at once to get the money, and not everyone can afford to do that. So it often hinders people from tapping into those financing tools, where if we had a locally funded tool that we could use, a mechanism, where if somebody wants to put on a roof, or wants to put on siding, or wants to put in windows, that enhance the curb appeal of that property, yet not cause that person to invest another $50,000 in improvements that, could possibly be deferred, but for that requirement, a fund like this would help those people mobilize much faster than one that requires them to comply with a whole lot of hoops
Right.
to jump through, so.
And that Live It Up program, if you recall, is a 0% interest loan, and then the last year is forgiven. And they have to make improvements to their house. So they have to show that they've made improvements, because of course, that's one of the things, we're trying to improve the housing stock. So they show documentation that they've made the improvements, and then that last year is forgiven, and it's a 0% interest loan. So it's getting people to buy homes and invest in homes in Wausau.
And that program has been wildly successful.
So TID 8, again, this district's financials changed from when I had put the budget together versus today, because this is the district that paid the $1 million for the mall. So I will be updating the budget sheets, but this, my PowerPoint, I was able to find time to do. So the projected surplus at the end of 2019 is $309,000. We're projecting a slight deficit at the end of 2020, $187,000. The outstanding debt in your book shows the 4 million, but we're moving $1 million of that existing debt that was in TID 3 over here. So now this shows 5 million without taking on new debt. I just wanted to,
Right.
and we have one developer obligation in the 2020 budget, and that is our obligation with Sherrill for the improvements that they made. And so the maximum amount that we would pay in any given year is the $57,500.
Well, and this is an important district, because I think we also know that, we just in economic development decided that we want to issue a new RFP for options on the LNS printing property. That's obviously in that area. We don't know yet what's going to happen with the site where the laundromat burned down. That's in that area. I mean, we just don't know. There could be a bunch of urban renewal on the horizon to happen in that district as well that would bring new increments. So we'll have to see what happens, but
And this district has paid for some important infrastructure projects as well. It did the Second Avenue project, and it's now helping pay for First Avenue. So those are kind of the big infrastructure projects that this district has funded for us. And then, again, these deficits are updated for the mall. Before, we were looking at very limited deficits. Now those deficits are increasing because of that $1 million. But again, the district actually is not mandated to retire until 2039. And even with contributing that $1 million, it will be out of the red by 2032. So we've got a 7-year buffer there.
it's good.
District 9 is the Bull Falls district. This has been running small deficits kind of all along. The deficit is, at the end of 2019, is projected to be just under 160,000. It will be 175,000 at the end of 2020. Its outstanding debt is $240,000 at the end of 2019. And its last debt payment is 2023. Really, we have no anticipated additional project costs. This district, again, if you recall, we gave the developer in this district a little, some concessions on their debt retirement because of some of the financial difficulties that they had run into that did impact our cash flows, but we are showing that it will cash flow by the end of its life. And again, these are the accumulated deficits, so you don't add them together. They're very manageable for the city
Well, and
in
this,
the long run.
their project actually changed when they added the canning line, and then they changed distribution arms, right? So,
yes.
okay.
District 2010 is out in the business campus. The projected deficit at the end of 2019 is $130,000. It will have a surplus at the end of 2020. Its outstanding debt is $1.3 million. We have no developer obligations in this district, and we have no projects set in the 2020 year. It saw about a 2.6% increase in its equalized value, and going forward, we will not be showing any deficits in the district. And I think the one thing I do have some capital proposed 2021 going forward, and that really is for the trail project that is being anticipated. Part of it was going to be in the business camp, the TID 11, and part of it was going to be in TID 10. So I just threw that expense in here, but even with that expense, we're showing a positive increment or a positive and year-end balance going forward. TID 11 is our business campus district. This is a big district. We've got a projected deficit of $563,000 at the end of 2019, end of 2020, that goes down to $233,000. Its debt outstanding is $10,605,000. These are debt anticipation notes, so we're going to be refinancing those at some point. Its equalized value is $61,254,000. It's saw an increase of 1955%. I don't even know how to say that.
1955%.
Percent increase in equalized value.
Not bad for what was once farmland.
Right. The Great Lakes cheese, you know, if you recall, that developer agreement lets them decide the first year. So if this is a partial assessment, they may decide to wait a year.
And draw less.
And draw, right, and not draw at all. But if they did, it would be about $785,000. And we've got about $99,000 of projects anticipated in 2020, just finishing up some things. You know, the street tree planting was never bid out yet. They need a mailbox, they need some signage, just some ancillary wrapping up of projects for that district. But we wouldn't be,
Now, in that finished equalized value, does that anticipate a completed Wausau Chemical?
no.
Not yet.
Because this equalized value is the value as of 1/1/2019
Okay.
that was set by the state. Sorry.
What is the status of the Wausau Chemical? Where are they at on their new building out there and so on?
So they are making progress. They've drawn down most of our loan. I think there's about $1 million left of our funds, maybe a little bit less than that.
They're under construction, and I think the Economic Development Committee had Rob Plashinsky in a couple months ago, and we had asked him to commit to a firm date to be out of and turn over the other property so that we could start the redevelopment process on that, and he was amenable to that. So it sounds like they're moving along.
So when we look at this district, we actually are showing a positive balance at the end of each year. So this has the projects, it has the value for Great Lakes cheese, and Wausau Chemical agreed to a minimum value. So that value is set at $6 million for the first, I think it was 6 years of his project. And the cash flow statement that you have in your packet shows the refinancing of the anticipation notes. So you can see that in 2022, we would pay those off. That's why you have a debt service payment of over $10 million, because it would be the interest too. And then starting in 2023, we would be retiring that debt, and actually I show it as being able to retire that over a 10-year period. So we would be able to make our development payment to Great Lakes Cheese and make these debt payments and maintain a positive value in the district each year.
Awesome.
With just those two entities. Now,
So the new building that Composite Envisions has looked at, that isn't up yet. That's part of this TID as well, right?
right, and I think when I put this budget together, you hadn't approved either of those two new agreements, because you.
Right, the ones that were on last week's council.
Right, so those weren't in here. So I can update that for.
Right, because we'd have two new buildings for that too then.
I have a question. Showing in 219, it shows a loss of 563, and then 220, it shows 233. So that's really not, that the difference between 563 and 233 as far as losses go? Because that's the way you explained the other one, as we were adding up the negatives and so on.
Well, you don't add them up, so, like if you look at the cash flow that's in your
No,
handout.
I'm not saying
oh,
that, I'm saying add them up. I'm saying that if you lost 563, 948, and 219, and you lost 233, 096, is that really 233 minus the 536? Is that the difference? And then if we're going to show a plus in 259, is that the difference between 233 and 259?
So between the 2 years, you gained enough increment, right?
Right.
To
To reduce it, so they were
You had-
able to pay back the general fund about $330,000 between 2019 and 2020.
Okay, so when we move to 221, they pay back 259, 732, right?
Well, they'll pay
So-
back 233,
Okay,
and they'll have cash in the bank. The district will have cash in the bank of $359,000.
So then as they keep
Okay.
paying, we just keep growing.
Right, so
Oh.
it will have paid back the general fund, the 233 from the year before, and it will have now it will have cash in the
so
bank of
what's the difference
359.
between 222, you show 1,163,000, but in 223, we show 940,000?
Because in 2022, we refinanced that debt, so we're only paying interest in 2022, and then in 2023, when we've refinanced those anticipation notes, then we're paying principal and interest, so our expenses go up.
Okay.
once
So
we
it
hit-
continues to go down in 24, 25, and 26,
Right,
and then it starts to increase again in 27,
right.
28, and 29 through 2032.
Right, and that, again, our expenses go down once we get to those later years because our commitment to Great Lakes Cheese, because we were sharing increment with them for a certain number of years, and then it ended. It ended at a certain dollar amount. We shared it was like 50% of the increment for either a certain period of years or a certain dollar amount.
Yes.
Oh, and it says it right in here. Let's see. We're sharing 50% of the increment for a 10-year period not to exceed $5.9 million. So once we get to, so if at the end of the 10-year period, they haven't received 5.9, they're done. If they only got 4 million because the value didn't, meet what they had predicted, they would be done, or when they reach 5.9 million. So if you add these up, well, we've got the 4 million for the Wausau Chemical too, but, and then there was that contingency of 500,000 if they had extra,
Is that
Site
above the 8 million we borrowed to finance the move out to the industrial park?
the 8 million that we borrowed was just for Wausau Chemical. We didn't have to borrow any money for Great Lakes
Oh,
Cheese.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. That's right,
Yeah.
that's Wausau Chemical.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yep. So this district is looking really good.
Yep.
District 12, not so much. So District 12 actually has a negative increment value. So, again, a lot of the property in this district was related to the Aspirus, and we had the Sears, let's say, that went from taxable to tax exempt. So this district, if you look on page 52 of your handout, when we created the district, it had a value of $32 million. Today, the district has a value of $24 million. So it's producing no levy dollars for us because it's actually in a deficit
Right.
value. So what we will be doing, the state has a provision in the law that once you have had experienced 2 years of decline in value, you can go and ask them to reset your value so that you wipe out,
So they create a new bottom.
they create a new bottom, right? They basically reduce the bottom to a point. And if you think about this, a lot of communities could be in this situation because the goal is to redevelop, right? So you've got this property that has buildings on it, it has things, and then those buildings all get torn down, and then even though maybe those buildings had a lot of value, but they were obsolete, so there was value that really was not at its highest and best use. That would be another example where you were creating basically a negative value. And so the state, in its law, has the ability to reset that value, because it was like, how do you figure you have to have the property in the district to do things, to help a developer tear down those things, but then it hurts the district, so.
Well, yeah, it becomes a chicken and an egg
Yes.
conundrum, but if you get to the point where you set a new basement, and then you have really nowhere to go but up, because then
Right.
as those properties start to re-enter the tax rolls with new value, we'd see that way faster growth than we would have if we stayed in this situation.
Right. So we will be, after budget season is over, we'll be bringing a project plan to you for an amendment that will authorize us to reset that value. So if you recall, the 8 million for Wausau Chemical was shared between TID 12 and that TID 11 out in the business campus. So this district has the 4 million for Wausau Chemical as its debt outstanding. And then it has one developer obligation right now, and that is Macandon, which is
It's the
athletic
Woodchucks
parks.
Clubhouse, right?
Right. And that payment would be $16,482. And we've got $634,000 of project costs, which generally are improvements out in the athletic park area. It is sidewalk and parking in that area. So that's what the projects would be in TID 12. And while it saw an increase in its value of 2%, it still is below value of when it was created.
Okay.
And as you can see, without resetting those values, there's really no way, and of course, this doesn't have the Aspirus in the prediction yet, but it's going to be a slow road if we're not able to.
It would be a good idea, though, to reset that floor before that clinic completes.
That's why we're going to do it right away.
Because you
yes.
want pure growth out of the clinic.
So when we do that, if the amendment is done anytime until October of next year, it looks at the value of 1/1/2020. So that's, if you do an amendment before October 31st, it looks at that previous year. If you do it after, it looks to the next year. And we couldn't do it before now because we had to have 2 years of experience before we can ask the state. So we've been waiting to see. So really, this is the soonest we could ask them to reset the value.
Sure. Makes sense.
So.
Question.
Yeah.
How do we end up in that situation? I mean,
Because of all of this property that has gone from taxable to tax exempt. So again, all of the property that was purchased for the Aspirus and the YMCA, some of it is in the district and some of it is out, but the some that was in went from taxable to tax exempt because the YMCA owns it now, and it had improvements on it, which were all torn down. The Sears building went from taxable to tax exempt. I used to know this by heart. There's a number, Great Lakes Cheese, because Great Lakes Cheese, the old Great Lakes Cheese is in this district, so
And
that
we own
went-
it now, too,
We
so-
own that now, so
Yep.
that went from taxable to tax exempt.
And
So
the
it's-
old Wausau Chem will do the same thing.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So that's why we're trying to get Wausau Chemicals changes in before December 31st so that the 1/1/20 value will be 0.
Right.
And that's the number that will
So have we
reset it.
taken possession of Wausau Chemical property yet?
No, December 31st is the date that they have agreed that transfer will take, or
Okay.
no
So then
later than
That
December.
will come off the tax rolls too then?
Yes.
So that will not improve
Until it
the
redevelops,
numbers.
but then they're going to RFP it pretty quick here. It's
Yeah.
coming in the next month or two for proposals.
Oh, I can imagine people are lined up around the block to acquire that property, yeah. okay.
Surprisingly, there's some interest, so,
Yeah, we always hear that.
So again, highlighting the TID closures, we're looking at 2020 for TID 5, 2022 for TID 7, and 2025 for TID 6. So debt service budget for 2020. We'll be retiring about 10 million of principal in the debt service fund and about 2.2 of interest charges, so the total expense is 12,457,795. Revenues from the tax increment districts and, well, I guess that's where it's coming from, is 7.6 million. And then the balance of the funds are coming from the levy, which is 4,123,000, and we have not changed that levy since 2002. So we have not had to pass on any additional costs to the taxpayer through the general levy since 2002.
That's important. I think that's important for people to recognize, is that in terms of the taxpayer's obligation to debt service based on the schedule, that their individual household obligation for municipal debt is not going up. That's huge.
And a message that we really need to get out there.
Well, yes, and I appreciate the debt message that appeared in this month's newsletter. I hope people will take time to read that. But I also think that as we show the pie chart as far as what your tax dollar gets spent on, because that'll be coming in your tax bills, there's always a little insert there. I think it's important to recognize for taxpayers that their debt service obligation, that amount has not increased since 2002. And I think it's important to get that fact out there on that insert when you show the pie chart.
Yep. And this is just a pie chart of the various funding mechanisms of the outstanding debt. Again, just kind of going over what we borrowed for in 2019, the fire station, the evidence storage facility, TID 6, which would be some of First Avenue and Thomas Street, TID 8 would be First Avenue, and then the capital plan. And then in 2020, what we're predicting is the capital plan. Again, the fire station and evidence storage, that fire station, we might not need that whole amount if we're not drawing on contingency. TID 3, the 1.2 million, TID 6 to finish up that Riverside Park and Cedar Street, and some of those other small little things, 2.2, and then TID 12, 785, so 6.8 million, so almost dropping the amount of borrowing in half in the 2020. And this is just a different kind of, this is in your book too, just kind of showing again what those changes are. So, and to see that while we borrowed 12 million in 2019, we paid off 10,000,008 of principal. In 2020's budget, we borrowed 6.8, and we'll be retiring about, well, this has 10.3 million, so we'll be retiring way more than we're taking on in the budget. And then our impact to our debt margin, if you recall, the state statutes allow us to borrow up to 5% of our equalized value. So at one point, we were above 50%, which is what our debt policy says we would not go above 50%. So we were at 57% in 2016. That has been going down. At the end of 2019, we will be at 45.3%. And then in 2020, we would be at 42.31%. And that is I only estimated a 1% increase in our equalized value. So that's a very conservative estimate for the equalized values that will come out next year.
Also a huge factoid that I think we need to put out in our tax bill insert, because much has been made in recent months about the city's debt and its borrowing, and I think that people need a realistic understanding of what debt and borrowing means. I mean, we borrowed at low interest rates to catch up on some capital, but our payoff schedule is way more aggressive than I think people know, and so I think it's important that we get that information out.
That debt calculation, does that include our TID debt?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so the 54 million we owe in TID debt, that's in that figure, right?
Yes, yes.
All right, thank you.
So that was really my goal to cover tonight.
Okay? And so we don't have to take any action on this. This is informational for now. Tuesday, we'll have our budget books with
Yep.
our projections and see where we're at. We always start with our cost to continue and then work into it from there. And so our next budget session will be next Thursday at 6:30. And then I suspect we'll probably also need a third session. And what we'll do is compare calendars and see when we can get a quorum for that following week to hopefully finish that process the week after and see when we can get everybody together and wrap that up. Hopefully, we can do it in 3 meetings. We usually can.
And we did the format of the supplemental request again,
Mm-hmm.
so we'll have that summary for you on Tuesday as well.
Will you want us to rank the supplements again or
Well, yeah,
not?
and I didn't know if that might be something that we would want to talk about if you wanted to. I couldn't remember if finance did it last time or.
We
if-
did.
Okay,
Finance did
fine.
it last year,
So then
so-
I'll have the ranking forms for you too then.
Yes, and so
Okay.
then we can get those back to you between meetings and at least see how the supplements stack up and then figure out based on the ranking how many we can afford. So I think that's important. So we'll be ready for those sheets too then.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, that's all we have on our agenda tonight. Does anyone have questions for Mary Ann?
What was the date again? for the-
10:10, Thursday?
I'm just checking with the county.
It's at 6:30?
Right, yeah, county board is at, on the 17th and the 22nd.
Okay, so we make sure we don't pick those dates for our next one then. And, yeah, then we'll come up with a third date, either Tuesday night at our normal finance meeting or Thursday night at the budget session. All right, any questions for Mary Ann? If not, a motion to adjourn is appropriate. Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Nutting. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? None are opposed. We'll stand adjourned then. Thanks, everyone.